Morning, everyone. We're going to get started in just a second.
Good morning, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. This is Jill Martin with the Recycling Partnership. Welcome to Webinar Wednesdays. It's our kickoff day with this series of Webinar Wednesdays. And today our focus is on recycling contamination. And Keisha Burton from the Recycling Partnership is going to kick us off. For your reference, this webinar will be recorded and available on the Recycling Partnership website after today's viewing. And you should see a chat or raise hand feature for any questions that you might have during the presentation. Feel free to use that feature, and then I will funnel the questions to Keisha as we go along. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Keisha.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Keisha Burton, and I'm the Community Program Coordinator with the Recycling Partnership. I'm excited to speak to you guys today about curbing contamination at the curb. On this webinar, we will also have a guest speaker, Kurt Fenselmacher, the Deputy Director of the Environmental Services Department for the City of El Paso. They're a community that we've worked with to utilize our contamination best practices, and he'll be able to give you a good idea of what it's like to deploy one of these programs in your community. But before we do that, I'd like to give you a brief introduction as to who the partnership is for those of you who may not know who we are. We're a national nonprofit that works together with communities and companies to help Americans recycle well and recycle every day. We receive funding from our funding partners that allow us to leverage that funding to go into communities to help improve the recycling infrastructure within those communities. So at the partnership, we view recycling as being loosely connected but highly dependent, meaning each of the pieces in the recycling system works together to make recycling efficient. We rely on consumers, the community, haulers, the processors, manufacturers, and retailers to all be working together so that the system can work effectively for all. Our focus is on increasing access to recycling, also increasing the capture of recyclables in communities, as well as improving the quality of material that's going into the recycling stream, which is the basis of what we're talking about today. We focus on improving operations and making them as efficient as possible, and providing educational resources for communities to help see measurable change for their recycling programs. These are a few of the communities that we've worked with throughout the years. These communities can be large or small. They're across the nation. And that means that we go in, and whether we're helping to implement cart-based service or going in to do contamination, our goal is to just simply help communities' recycling programs strive. We take a look at recycling programs throughout the nation, and we believe that there's an average of 800 pounds of recyclables that are generated in households, in American households. And we look at our recycling system through a top-down approach where residents or communities may not have access to recycling, but we want to move them through this system so that way they move from having no access to having a full-scale automated curbside service with good education. If you look at this chart, you'll see that with curbside collection and a good foundation for education, there's less material being lost in the stream. We're essentially capturing more than 3/4 of the material that's potentially being generated in a household. And those are the goals that we're striving to do today. But we also recognize that recycling is difficult because we have a twin bin challenge at the curb. Residents and communities have a trash receptacle and they also have a recycling receptacle. And there's recycling that's going into the trash stream, but there's also trash ending up in the recycling stream. And I know that many of our communities today are struggling with that. So that's part of our goal, is to really give you some steps you can take to help remove the trash from the recycling stream and help clean up the stream as best as possible. And it's important for us to do that because our residents want to recycle, and recycle right, but we're seeing a lot of this. We're seeing a lot of film, plastic bags, yard waste, tanglers, food waste, miscellaneous plastics, miscellaneous aluminum, just all the things that we don't want to see in our recycling stream is ending up in there. And we know that contamination costs the system time and money and resources, and it's a safety hazard to workers who then have to go out and clean this stuff up out of the stream. And we want to essentially look at the bright spots. We look at the communities that have a less than 10% contamination, and what are the steps that they've taken to get there? How do we achieve a 10% or less contamination rate in communities? Because there are communities that have done that. Well, at the partnership, we've developed the Anti-Contamination Best Management Guide. It's our toolkit, and these resources are available for free on our website for you to download and use. But we've developed this kit that gives you a step-by-step guide of how you're going to engage, or you should engage with your stakeholders to really help reinforce proper education behavior and cleaning up your stream. We have a 3-pronged approach to outreach and education, and these are the steps here that's presented on your screen. These are the steps that essentially make up the entire outreach and education strategy for our contamination minimization plan. We believe in utilizing an inform and trigger method where we send out information to the residents and we reinforce the knowledge that they should have on their recycling. We're going to really essentially drive home the message of what they should put in their bin and what they shouldn't put in their bin. And we make sure that we keep the messaging clear and simple and easy for them to understand. We don't overload them with too much information at this particular point. We then believe that direct engagement at the curb is the best practice to see measurable change and to redirect behavior, because it's in your face. The residents see their carts, they touch their carts every day, and this is the best way to really engage because you know that the chances of them seeing it are much higher. And then we reinforce by focusing on just one specific issue that is problematic in your recycling stream. We don't necessarily tackle all 10 to 15 issues that may be present, but we focus on the top issues that are the most problematic in your stream. And we develop this by talking and discussing with both communities as well as your MRFs to really come up with this plan. So let's take a look at our information card. This card essentially could be used as an annual mailer, but as it relates to our CART program or our contamination program, it's the first piece of information that your residents are going to essentially get about their recycling program. It's going to essentially clean up the messaging, focus back down on being simple. We're going to put the recycling information into categories. We're going to use visual content that your residents are very familiar with seeing, because as consumers, they're going to see these items on their shelf in their supermarket or grocery store. So we keep these items simple and easy for them to recall and remember. And then we also reinforce what we don't want, but we do not do this by presenting many options. We instead look at key items, 5 to 6 top issue items that we don't want in the stream. We simplify the message down by using icons and not over inundating residents with a long list of what they can and can't recycle. So this is your information card. It would go out prior to actually having people physically in the street. Feedback at the curb, and this is basically our feet on the street portion of our contamination program. This is where we get our best bang for our buck. It's your direct engagement at the curb with residents. With this point, we're going to take the 5 to 6 contamination items that you've identified as being problematic, and we're going to put them on a tag. The tag allows us to be able to go out into the streets into your communities, take a quick look into recycling carts and identify the items that are present that shouldn't be there. We don't necessarily put tags on every single cart that we see. There's some training that goes into doing this, but essentially as a community, we would decide with you if your threshold is say 15% contamination or 20% contamination, 25, 30, and we would train you would assist you in training people to go out into the street and look through carts. They're gonna essentially grab the cart, give it a shake. If it's heavy, that typically gives an inspector indicator that there's stuff in there that shouldn't be there. They'll look and see if the cart exceeds the threshold, and then they're gonna identify any contamination that's present on the tag. If it's present on the cart, then they mark it off and apply the tag to the cart. Now in this particular phase, residents or communities can look at tagging carts in 2 approaches. You can either do a warning or you can do a rejection right out of the gate. And so we'll discuss that a little bit further in as well, but this is the feet on the street and the direct engagement. And this is the part of the program that essentially will redirect behavior and allow you to teach your residents and have them pivot in the direction that you want them to go. We follow up the direct engagement at the curb with issue-specific messaging. And what we mean by issue-specific messaging is, again, we're just focusing on the top item that is the most problematic for your MRF or for your processor or in your stream. And on the screen, you'll see that it says, we have information that says, don't bag recyclables. A lot of communities don't want plastic bags because the film is problematic for the processors, right? However, there are other communities that struggle with things such as textiles or tanglers. And so these items can all be modified and customized to fit the need of your community. And we have done that with several communities that we've worked with. So these are just examples of how we target specific items. This information would then go out to your community halfway through having feet on the actual street within your community. This can be done as a mailer. You could also use it through supporting campaign items such as billboards, as bus wraps, or posters and signage, and even banners that can be hung in city halls or along the fences of community schools. Why do we take this approach to cleaning up the stream? Because we know that tagging works. We've worked with several communities and most of the data remains roughly the same. That when we do a tagging program, the tagging at the curb is recalled in high numbers. So Denver, for instance, we ran a tagging program in Denver, and 73% of the residents who were aware of the program recalled physically getting a tag on their cart. And the benefit of tagging, or the additional benefit of tagging, is that we were focusing on capturing more material or a specific material, or we're focused on reducing contamination. Regardless of our overall goal, we all saw an increase in capture rate throughout all of the programs. We talked a little earlier about rejecting, communities having to decide if they wanted to reject carts or not. Well, you could choose to not reject carts and just go with the outreach portion of the campaign where you just apply the tags, and that could be effective. It might be effective for your community. Communities have done that and seen gains. However, we know that the best way to redirect and disrupt behavior patterns is to tag and reject, because the disruption would then allow you to have your resident pivot in the right direction. We'll talk about multifamily in just a bit, but go back. So with the tagging, if we look into this community, something to know here with these 2 communities is that Dartmouth and New Bedford they're sister communities. They share a recycling coordinator, and in New Bedford, they opted not to reject carts because the carts rejection became a political issue. And so they felt it would be best to simply lead with just the tagging alone. Dartmouth, however, did opt to reject carts. And so you can see that they had varying differences. Both had great improvement, but the variance is that rejecting the cart does allow for behavior pattern to change. So we encourage communities to really be bold in taking this step. And we know that if we're rejecting carts, someone that might say, well, my resident is gonna just simply stop recycling, right? That that's typically the threat that residents might make if they get a rejection on their cart. Well, we've run this program in Lowell, Massachusetts, among other communities, and we've seen that rejection starts out relatively high. However, after the second service cycle, it typically drops off and stays to a relatively low norm. And we took a look at the set out rates, and we compared them from the beginning of the program throughout the entire life of the program. And we noted that the set out rate did not change. It remained relatively stable throughout the entire cycle of the program. So we know that rejecting of the carts may cause residents to feel upset about having their cart rejected and being left to essentially figure out how to clean up the cart themselves, right? Which is what we want to do. We want to disrupt the behavior and really have them re-engage in good behavior patterns in recycling, but they're not going to stop utilizing your recycling program just because they got a rejection of their cart. It does force the behavior change, and that's what we want to do, is really pivot them in the right direction, because residents do want to recycle, and most people want to recycle right. They just don't have necessarily all the tools provided to them to do so. So we want to be able to do that for them. We applied this program in the city of El Paso, Atlanta. And some of the things that went really well for Atlanta is that they worked very closely with the partnership. They hired temporary staff to go out into the community to do this tagging program. They focused on removing bagged recyclables from their stream because they believe that was their biggest contamination problem. And then they also opted to reject carts. So we're going to take a look at some of their key successes and what happened as a result. Well, they saw that, again, their focus wasn't necessarily on increasing capture, but they did have an added increase in their capture rate. Their increase resulted in a 27% increase in recycling capture. They were able to decrease their contamination by 57%. And then they were able to reduce the bagged recyclable content in their stream by 62%. And these are all substantial numbers. So this is what we want to get to in your communities. And those are a very quick rundown of the steps that we encourage people to take to help clean up their stream and improve the capture rate in their communities. And I'm going to go ahead and hand this off to Kurt Fenstermacher, who is the Deputy Director, as I said, of the City of El Paso's Environmental Services Department. They're a community that we've worked with over the last year to deploy this program into their community, and he's going to give you a great feedback on how he deployed this program in his community and some of the benefits and challenges that they may have faced.
And of course, now we're having problems with our screen here. So are we seeing that?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay. Very good. Let me just jump over. It's the wrong screen again. Bear with me.
There we go. We can see it, Kurt.
Yep, you can see it, Kurt.
You can see the full screen, or is it?
Yep.
Okay. Very good. Good morning. My name is Kurt Fenstermacher, or good afternoon, wherever we are today. I did want to roll through and give you a brief welcome to El Paso. El Paso is the 19th largest city in the country and about 6th largest in Texas. We're right at the corner where New Mexico, Mexico, and Texas meet. Just want to give you a geographic reference. So we're a bit of a distance from many of our major ports or other markets where we would see recyclables go. And we do have a significant transient population with people coming and going across the border, and also a major military installation here in El Paso. We are moving on screens, correct? I'm not seeing it here. Keisha, Jill?
It's not moving.
Okay.
Let's see. Kurt, would you like me to share the slide and I can progress?
Yep. There you go. We'll go back to you. I'm going to stop.
All right. Okay.
All right. So there's the El Paso screen with a wonderful greetings from El Paso postcard there, and we can move on through, Keisha. We started our recycling program. We were pretty late to the game with curbside recycling. It was 2007 that we launched our curbside program. Prior to that, we had drop-off programs located at schools and a variety of drop-off locations, but a 1.5% recycling rate, and most specifically because we did not have containers at the curb. And I think that was, well, it is our significant barrier to entry to the program. So we launched with 96-gallon containers and had a great launch to this program with about a 16% contamination rate when we began. And it was a very robust education program. I think we invested about $450,000 into education promotion just to get the community excited and knowing what to put in their containers, et cetera. So we had lots of political support, and if we could move forward. But there was not a MRF in town. There was not a material recycling facility in the region. So we had to create one. So there was an RFP put out in 2005. We had a processing contract awarded in 2006. The site for the MRF was built, and that's a third-party vendor. It's Friedman Recycling Corporation, and we began the program in 2007. And for those that remember, 10 years ago, we had global financial crisis, and it was tough to weather for many of us in the recycling community. That triggered an amendment to the contract. We were currently only accepting plastics number 1 and number 2. In 2011, that changed to including 3 through 7. And hey, that sounds great if you have markets for all of those things. And that if then really comes into question as we move towards green fence and national sword policy, et cetera. But we saw lots of changes in the program towards the last 4 or 5 years with market-related issues. And then there was a second amendment to the contract. So I think our contracts, every contract for every municipality is unique. But we had some layers of difficulty that we're now having to work with on our contamination. Keisha. So unfortunately, I would say about 3 years into launching our recycling program, we discontinued our robust education marketing. And that did not kick up again until 2016. We had a high contamination rate, roughly in the 30-ish% range. And we're also responsible for paying what goes from the MRF to the landfill. We saw recycling markets at a 5-year low. For us in El Paso, it's a voluntary program. So there had been no consequences for not doing it correctly. We did put in place something we called a 3-strike rule, where if you were found in violation or putting in too much trash or garbage or something that doesn't belong, a warning notice, and then another notice, and then finally that container was removed from the program. But this had really little impact because we were only hitting less than 1,000 houses per year, and that did not make a difference in the contamination rate. So I mentioned the transient population. If we are not continuously educating, then you're going to lose those people that are only here in the community for 2 years or so. So yeah, the contamination rate continues. If you want to move to that next slide, from 2017, and this is where we started doing quarterly audits, materials audits at the Friedman Recycling facility based on our material coming in. And it had moved from 26% to our second quarter of 2018, 34.5%, and a crazy number. And we were, during this time, advertising, we were doing marketing, or at least what we thought was good. So next slide. I mean, that was our significant issue of how are we going to get this number down. And that's when we engaged with the Recycling Partnership. So reducing that contamination rate by implementing this behavior change campaign, and we called it Tug, Tip, Turn, Tag, which is basically what Keisha already said. If we go to a container, we tug it, we look in the lid, we turn it if it's not going to be collected, and then we tag it, leaving some education piece for the audience or for the resident. Go ahead. So behavior change marketing, a little different than straight advertising. And there's a lot of nuances there, and I'm not the expert. I just know that it's working for us. We needed different results. What we were doing wasn't working. We were spending about $300,000-$400,000 on promo and advertising budget, and our numbers continued to climb on the contamination rate. So again, echoing, it's keeping our message simple, choose that one specific problem and message closer to the behavior, i.e. get out into the neighborhoods, knock on doors, leave tags behind, and have that one-on-one communication. And we focused in the past on don't put this in your bin and don't do this. And we tried to change that message to be a little more positive and encouraging. And finally, different ways to measure the results. So these are our print pieces that we put out, and they're very similar to what Keisha had presented. The OOPS tags in the bottom left-hand corner, a general info mailer on the top left. There was an issue-specific mailer, which ended up probably 2 weeks into each cycle we were doing to remind people do not bag recyclables. We were trying to tackle both the plastic bag problem and items that were in bags at the same time. And for a while, and we've discontinued this, but we were leaving thank you for recycling tags for those that were doing it right. Just a couple pictures, the officer, and we do have a set of code officers that work exclusively on recycling. They'll come through, take a look at that container. If there's an issue, they put a red tag on it and attach a zip tag and attach the OOPS tag to the container. And as you, I think, all know, recycling can be very personal. And when you get that tag, you're going to call and find out why or what's happening. So that's part of our education process, is getting those calls. We try to leave as much information as we can on that OOPS tag. And you can see the picture on the right. The officers checked off what the contaminant was, or on the bottom right-hand corner of that OOPS tag, the container was too close to another container and couldn't be serviced. Next slide. We also have a Recycle mobile app. This is something we designed in-house. It's what our code officers use to go house by house, and it generates basically a tag or a ticket, which goes into our database system for follow-up communication. We found early on that we just had too many OOPS tags, and we discontinued this, but we still have this app running in the background. When we can level out, you'll see in a slide momentarily, when you start a new area, there's a lot of OOPS tags that get issued and try to correct that bad behavior. But over time, those OOPS tags diminish, and we're getting more positive results of what's happening in the container. So we have 8 recycling officers, and we had that before we switched to the behavior modification or the recycling partnership program. And their focus is exclusively on recycling. They work with our drivers, and our drivers here start at 4:30 in the morning. So they're out with them trying to be ahead of the routes and checking containers before the truck gets there. That way they can turn the container and not have it collected if there's a problem. Obviously at 4:30 in the morning, we're not having much public contact, but we do leave the tags behind. And during more daylight hours, people coming out for newspapers, whatever, there is engagement with our officers of, hey, did you know that doesn't go in and this is what you need to do. They also are scheduled for public outreach. That's usually in the early afternoons, if that's schools or shopping center pop-ups or whatever it might be. And we use them exclusively for issuing the tags and warning notices. So we believe that this process improvement has been a clear roadmap on how we can decrease the amount of contamination in our system. And we are still testing. We pilot each section of our city. We have about 185,000 account holders, and 8 officers clearly can't do that. So we're doing about 20 to 25,000 households at a time, which that time is about 6 to 8 weeks. We're making some process improvements along the way, things that didn't work, and modifying it. We are increasing our communication with our operations side, with the drivers and the code compliance officers. Clearly, that's our first step. These drivers know which containers generally, historically, have been bad, and then our officers will work to help get that cleaned up. And overall, it's enhanced our customer service because we're able to have that one-on-one direct conversation. So bottom in the red circle, this is just an 8-week pilot program, week after week of doing oops tags, our set out rates, you can see the numbers there, about 50-ish%, 49%. But our rejection rate on that first week was nearly 100%, kind of crazy. And then it diminished immediately once people knew that, hey, someone's checking my bin and I need to care what I'm putting in that container. And again, we've not done education for a long time. So putting that information mailer out there and getting that in the hands as a refresher was a good reminder of what's in and what's out. You can see that continued down to about a 10%, roughly 11% rejection rate by week 8. And we have found that to hold true for every trial that we've gone through. And we're in our 4th trial at the moment, but starts off very heavy, 100%-ish or 80%, whatever that is, and then diminishes down to about 12%. So we're with about 20,000 households, we're trying to target with the 50% set out rate, about 10,000 households that have that container out on route. So you can see on our first 1, 2, 3, and even 4th week, we had some operational challenges of being able to cover all the houses on the route. And so we began to speed up our quick look. It's the inspection, if you want to call it that, is not to be a 2-minute ordeal of rooting through the container, lifting the lid, shaking it, and making this into a long process. It really is a 15-second or less kind of check. And then if there's a problem, you leave a tag and move on. But you can see our red line on the bottom is the thank you notes, and those increased over time. And our blue line, the oops tags, decreased over time. And we were able to effectively hit more households with a more efficient system. So the bottom line for us, we did a materials audit in October of 18, and we launched our pilot in July-ish. We brought in 62,000 tons for that pilot, and they were targeted routes, meaning these were routes that we had educated on, and then we used those same routes to measure the effectiveness of the program in that October audit. So we had a 29.5% contamination rate. And frankly, from this seat, I was hoping to see a lot less. So it was a drop, and I'm happy with that. It was a 15% reduction in contamination. So that is fantastic. I just in big numbers of 29%, it's still a big number, and we've got work to do. But it proved to me and to our team that the pilot worked, and this new form of behavior modification versus just standard advertising was going to work. And then we had another materials audit just this past March where we had 80 tons in, and it was random routes, meaning some that we had educated on and others that had not had any kind of new info mailers or any oops tags. And that went back up to 33.9%, but it was still a 3% reduction from the previous audit back in last July. So overall, it's a move in the right direction. We've got tons of work to do, and I think that's part of the story for El Paso to tell, is we have let it creep up, that being the contamination rate, and we're working hard with this team of 8 to bring that back down. And the future will be whether that 8 turns into 16, or what other kinds of collateral material do we add to this campaign to get the word out. So moving forward, we will do quarterly audits at the Freedman Recycling Facility. That's part of our contract, and we continuously make adjustments to the campaign as needed. We started the citywide rollout in late October, and that continues in about 8-week trials, meaning 8-week segments, through 2020 to complete the entire city of all 190,000 households. It will take us about 1.5 years to roll through. And then the plan likely is to start right over and roll right through again.
So thank you, Kurt, for that. I guess this is a good time to stop to see if anyone has any questions. All right. So just to drive home the message, core lessons that we have seen in utilizing an anti-contamination best management practice and deploying this throughout various communities, large and small communities. is that tagging works, direct engagement with citizens, with your residents work. Like Kurt mentioned, getting into the neighborhood, being physically present, looking in the carts is eye-catching. It drives a notice. It makes your residents stop and go, wait, what's going on? Something different is happening with our recycling program. Maybe I need to pay attention. Sending out the general information mailer is a really good way of refreshing residents' knowledge, reinforcing what you want them to do, but making sure that you think in terms of how to best apply that messaging by keeping everything simple. Keep it clear, keep the messaging concise. Don't overwhelm residents with too much information. They don't work in the industry that we work in. They're just general consumers, and so they need it to be more simplified for them. And we reinforce through positive messaging instead of being too harsh. We want to say, oops, we're sorry that this happened, right? But could you try this method instead, or this action instead? We believe that the tagging works. We know that for recall, because it's physically present, your residents will see the tag. They'll be able to remember that they've gotten a tag. The tag will mimic the general information mailer, and so it'll keep everything present. Rejecting carts, we want to disrupt the behavior, whether you opt to reject the carts or do it as a warning or a one-strike system. But the rejecting of the carts helps to really disrupt the behavior pattern that we've seen up to this point and really help your residents pivot in the right direction. Because as I mentioned before, most people want to recycle, and they want to recycle right. They just need the information presented to them in a way that is going to get them to do it well. And mailers, I know we make the assumption sometimes that people don't check their mail, but that is not true. Throughout these campaigns, we've seen that on average, about 30 to 35% of residents who where we've done this recall getting their mailers. So even if you think that they're only using modern technology and they're paying their bills by mail, they're not checking their mail, they do check their mail. And so these elements put together are the tools for a great contamination program in communities. And all of these resources are available at our website. So this slide shows an image of our website. We have a drop-down box on our For Communities page. There's a campaign builder. You can log into this campaign builder and help and start building these pieces for your community today. Like I said earlier, all these items are customizable. They're adaptable to your community, and you can start deploying these as soon as you're ready. We also believe in giving communities resources to better help them in many different ways. So we know that social media is an item or a hot topic that people are really striving to push, and it can be a really efficient and economical way of advertising. Well, we have a social media kit that has a year's worth of social media content that includes illustration, videos, memes, photos, pop quizzes, interactive quizzes. It also includes a really great guide on how to best utilize Facebook or social media for your best engagement and get more bang for your buck. And this can all be accessed via our website as well. So the link is here. It's recyclingpartnership.org/social-2018. And for those of you who may be inclined, we really encourage you to also jump onto our closed Facebook group. It is a private group and it's closed, so messaging on here or information shared between municipal coordinators will not be allowed to be shared out to personal Facebook pages, but will remain internally within the group. But this is a great way of networking. Many of the coordinators here also develop open source material that they share in this group for other communities to also use. This is a great resource for obtaining other social media elements, other posters, flyers, and media and outreach material for your community that you can also use. So there are great opportunities to just really expand your program through using different items. We've just recently launched a municipal measurement program, and this is really exciting for us. It's a state-of-the-art data tracking resource. With this particular resource, you'll be able to track your curbside recycling tonnage and information, your drop-off, your multifamily, and organics in one place. Once you've updated the resource with the program with your baseline, this program will develop recommendations for solutions for your program. It'll highlight information or tips that you can use to implement for your community for best program improvement and efficiency. You'll be able to track your data and your metrics year by year, so you'll be able to see trends and changes in your program, and it'll help you to essentially start making decisions or make better decisions for your programs based on having a great place to house all of this content. So all of these tools and resources are free to use for all communities. You just have to go onto our website, download or log into the campaign builder, sign up for the registration for the municipal measurement programs. But these are all great resources that we have available. So I encourage you highly to check out our website. We have lots of resources for communities there. And I thank you all for participating in our webinar Wednesday. I see that we have a few questions here. So before I close it out, I'm going to just give a quick scroll through. So let's see.
Keisha, it looks like Molly has a question on Kurt's slide deck about the weekly pilot program tracking.
So Kurt, could you explain a little bit more about the 8-week program? Judging from the number of households, can you explain a little bit further on your...
Sure can. So when we started the program, we weren't sure where we would see that drop-off number. I mean, Keisha presented it earlier on the OOPS tags and how that moves from 50%, or in our case, 80 to 100% rejection to about 10, 12% at the end of some period of time. We weren't sure what that period of time would be. So our first pilot was 16 weeks, and that was excessively long looking back. So we had a significant amount of OOPS tags that first week, and it dropped down the second week, third, fourth, fifth. But by the 6th week, that was holding at 11% and continued to hold 11, 10, 12 throughout the rest of those 16 weeks. So we made a decision moving forward that each of our subsequent penetrations into different neighborhoods of El Paso would be in the range of 6 to 8 weeks long. And that variance really is about holiday scheduling or something else that might be going on that we can't squeeze it all in 6 weeks. Okay. Does that help answer that?
And well, during those 8 weeks, were there different routes?
Yes. So these are working out to be about 16 routes, roughly 2 routes per employee. And they do have a vehicle, so they get out and drive, but also are walking along the routes. But we've found that they can get through, well, yeah, because of the set out rate, they're able to get through about 700 to 1,000 homes per day.
Okay. And I'm going to go through really quickly. We have a question here on demographic and behavior-based changes. So in Las Cruces, New Mexico, we ran this program. We did select random routes, and one of our question was whether or not we would choose certain areas based on ethnic or economic classes. And one of our areas was selected, which was a more affluent area, and another area which were a little bit more economically challenged. We did not see huge variations. In fact, most of the contamination or higher contamination came out of the areas that were in a higher economic class. And we can possibly equate that to more discretionary funds typically may increase consumer spending. And so there's more material going into that particular household or that region. And the residents there are wanting to recycle, and they are not provided, they weren't previously provided with really good, clear, concise, and simple messaging to better influence their recycling habit. But we didn't see large variations in whether or not your economics or racial or ethnicity affected your behavior pattern. Go ahead.
Keisha, I was going to jump in. This is Jill. So Keisha has firsthand experience in the Las Cruces area running their tagging program. But on a broader scale, we at the Recycling Partnership are digging into that issue further. So we will be studying how ethnicity and race and economic class would or would not affect recycling behavior. So we're just dabbling our feet into that now to gather more information in hopes to share that out when we have results.
And then Mike asked, what was the biggest contaminant? Were you able to not pick up the recycling if it was too contaminated. So I can, Kurt, I'm going to punt that to you. I can probably respond for Las Cruces, but I'll let you respond for El Paso.
Yeah, let me start. I think we had a lot of assumptions that we made prior to doing some measurement analysis, which was before the pilot with the Recycling Partnership. And that was, oh, there's going to be a lot of trash. There's a lot of yard waste. Tanglers is a big problem. And frankly, it wasn't true, or that it was plastic bags. And by weight, of course, they're not a whole lot, but they mess up the recycling system at the MRF. And we know that things going in a bag aren't being opened at the MRF. And so that ends up just going right into the contamination pile. So for us, it was clearly a targeted message on bags, bags in general, but whatever else was in that bag.
Okay. And then let's see here, does the Recycling Partnership technical assistance also guide downstream action or studies, such as the quarterly material audits that the gentleman from El Paso mentioned, or the app development that was shown? So let's see.
I think I can mention the app. So the app that was shown was a customized for their location. Although again, the Recycling Partnership app is working on the development of an anti-contamination app that we will share out with communities should they want to do such a tagging program. So we have piloted our app in Atlanta, and we're looking at rolling it out full scale in Atlanta in June, as well as other communities in Ohio. So our app is under development and will be piloted and used coming this June, in hopes that other communities will have access to that app as well.
And let's see here, I'm using social media. I am using the social media information from your website. The one common contamination I'm finding in my multifamily recycling inspection is packaging material not being removed from the cardboard boxes before they are recycled. Do you have social media on removing packaging material before recycling boxes? I'm actually not sure if we do have something that specifically targets that, Virginia, but what we can do is we can take this back to our communications team, and we'll take a look at the social media in pieces that they may be dealing with now or working on now. And we'll see if there's a way or potential to develop something that targets that more specifically. So that's a good question. And then here we
also have a question, Keisha, in regards to translation of our toolkits in different languages. At this time, we don't have translations for our toolkits, although we do have the ability to print our collateral, such as the info card, the OOPS tag, and certain other pieces in multiple languages. So we don't actually do the translation, but we can help with the certain pieces to translate it into different languages. If you do the translation, we will make sure it gets put into our pieces should you want to use our educational pieces.
And that's exactly what happened here in El Paso.
Right. And Gina, I see that you're from the airport authority, and no, at this time, our toolkit is centered and focused on residential recycling. However, this program can be modified for drop-off style programs. And by extension, that means that you could potentially modify this to better fit your facility. If that is what you'd like to do, you'd have to make some modification. So on the inform end, you're going to want to keep it general. And you may want to, develop posters and signage that you can display within your facility. And you've already said that you work with your staff to train them on what they should be looking for in recycling, and we don't expect them to necessarily do any sorting. But if you're going to look to educate the public, who is typically transient coming through those types of facilities, your big impact is going to be on signage. The type of containers that you have available for recycling collection, you're going to want to look at containers that have modified lids to minimize the potential for trash to going into the recycling. And then you want to use your staff to be your direct engagement, have them feel empowered to talk to your customer base that are coming through your facilities, and really re-engaging with them and reinforcing better habits and better behavior patterns while they're on the property. And you can also focus on top issue in the same manner by using sandwich boards or billboards or posters or any kind of larger display that you can strategically place throughout the facility. Those three options can be worked together to develop a program specific to a facility like yours. And they can be used for a drop-off program as well. So in conclusion, I think that's all the questions. Oh, I have one more. Are we seeing cities making changes to the types of materials that are being collected in lieu of China's national sword and lack of infrastructure across the county? I
can take that one, Keisha. We are seeing programs reevaluate what they're collecting, although there's getting a lot of press about certain communities that may be dropping certain materials, but they're definitely the minority. The majority of the programs are really asking themselves how they can clean up the stream before they start to abandon either materials or their programs altogether. So there is some communities that you may hear about in the news that are either suspending service or eliminating certain materials from their stream, but that is definitely the minority. And then most communities are looking at what they can do to clean up the stream before they take those measures.
Right. And in short, this webinar, it was recorded and you will have access to it after today. It'll be housed on our website as well, but we can also look into making sure that we send up a follow-up email to all the attendees today with a link directly to it. So we, again, thank you for participating with us on this webinar Wednesday and our discussion on fighting and curbing contamination at the curb. It's been a pleasure talking with you or discussing this with you all. And again, we just want to remind you that we're all in this bin together at the Recycling Partnership. We really believe in working with communities, working with coordinators and companies to really help improve the recycling for the recycling stream. And that's our whole focus. So again, I encourage you to visit our website, utilize our resources, and please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you have after today. Thank you.